The mythical islands of the Atlantic on old maps have had diverse origins, instructive to study. Perhaps only one of them derives its name and being directly from a real human episode of a twilight period in history. When the Moors descended on Spain in 711 and rapidly overran the Iberian Peninsula, it was most natural, indeed nearly inevitable, that some Christian fugitives should continue their flight from the seaboard to accessible islands already known or rumored, or even desperately commit themselves in blindness to the remoter mysteries of the ocean. Such an event would afford a fabric for the embroidery of later fancy. A part of this has been preserved by record, and it is curious to watch the development of the story, which takes several forms, not differing widely, however, one from another. When Pedro de Ayala, Spanish ambassador to Great Britain, found occasion in 1498 to report English exploring activities to Ferdinand and Isabella, he wrote that the people of Bristol have, for the last 7 years, sent out every year 2, 3, or 4 light ships in search of the island of Brazil and the 7 cities. Cartographers and explorers identified the island of the 7 cities with some legendary, but generally believed in patch of land afar out in the ocean. But the earliest of them dates 6 or 7 centuries after the supposed fact, and it may well be that a distinction was made that became lost by blending. There is indeed one well-attested voyage of 1480 conducted by well-known navigators, seeking this insular Brazil, and it was not the earliest. The first appearance of that island is on a map dated 1325 as a disk of land well at sea, westward from Hibernia, but a map of 1375 turns the disk into a ring surrounding a body of water which is studded with small islands apparently 7 in number. These miniature islands have sometimes been thought to represent the 7 cities of the old legend. The Antilles was a home for the elusive cities more favored than Brazil by cartography and tradition. In 1474 Toscanelli, a cosmographer at Florence, being consulted by Christopher Columbus as to the prospects of a westward voyage, sent him a copy of a letter which he had written to a friend in the service of the King of Portugal. From the island Antillia, which you call the 7 cities, and whereof you have some knowledge, to the most noble island of Sapongo, are 10 spaces, which make 2500 miles. The name Antillia had appeared on the maps much earlier. It is doubtfully found in an inscription identifying a shore, not drawn, on which a colossal statue of warning had been erected. The location seems to be somewhere in the region where Corvo of the Azores should appear. However, there can be no doubt of Toscanelli's meaning as he appends a long inscription. In the year 734 of Christ, when the whole of Spain had been won by the heathen Moors, the island Antillia, called 7 Cities, was inhabited by an archbishop from the Porto in Portugal, with 6 other bishops, and other Christians, men and women, who had fled thither from Spain, by ship, together with their cattle, belongings, and goods. In 1414 a ship from Spain got nighest without being endangered. Ferdinand Columbus, living between 1488 and 1539, says that some Portuguese cartographers had located Antilla not above 200 leagues due west from the Canaries and Azores, which they conclude to be certainly the island of the 7 cities, peopled by the Portuguese at the time that Spain was conquered by the Moors in the year 714. At which time they say, 7 bishops with their people embarked and sailed to this island, where each of them built a city, and to the end none of their people might think of returning to Spain, they burnt the ships, tackle and all things necessary for sailing. Some Portuguese discoursing about this island, there were those that affirmed several Portuguese had gone to it, who could not find the way to it again. He relates particularly how in the time of Henry of Portugal, perhaps about 1430, a Portuguese ship was drove by stress of weather to this island Antilla. The crew went to church with the islanders but were afraid of being detained and hurried back to Portugal. The prince heard their story and ordered them to return to the island, but they escaped from him and were not found again. It is said that of the sand gathered on the island for the cookroom a 1/3 part was pure gold. Cartographers and explorers identified the island of the 7 cities with some legendary, but generally believed in patch of land afar out in the ocean. But the earliest of them dates 6 or 7 centuries after the supposed fact, and it may well be that a distinction was made that became lost by blending. In a still later stage of development the name of the 7 cities becomes separate and strangely migratory, not avoiding even the mainland. We know, for instance, what power the 7 cities of Cibola had to draw Coronado and his followers northward through the mountains and deserts of the arid southwest until all that was real of them stood revealed, as the even then antiquated and rather uncleanly terraced villages of sun-dried brick. But the island of the 7 cities appeared as such on other maps off the American coast about a third as far as the Bermudas and midway from Cape Breton to the Bay of Fundy. The size is considerable, the outline being deeply embayed on several sides and very irregular. 2 islets lie near 2 of its projecting peninsulas. It bears a brief inscription giving the name Sete Sadagus and indicating that it belongs to Portugal. In 1546 there had been some exploring and fishing in these waters but no determined settlement near them, and they were hardly yet familiar. However, a Mercator map of 1587 finds it prudent to move this island farther south and farther out to sea, reducing its area, but retaining its traditional name. Not long after this, the 7 cities disappear from geography.